as we talk about being able to engage in this dialogue around what it means to break from tradition, I have to start with this frame. In our generation, tradition is almost like the taboo word. Like, we don't want to touch tradition. And I want to give just the definition of tradition, so we understand when we're saying that, what we're saying and what we're not saying. So for the sake of our dialogue and our time here, tradition is defined as the passing down of customs, beliefs, and behaviors from one generation to another, acting as a crucial element of cultural, family, and social identity. It is important. It is valuable. Tradition frames who we are, period. Family, as Christians, as believers, the very practice of continuing to open up the Bible and read together in such a way is tradition. And so to assume that all tradition is bad is a fallacy, and one in which that can get us in trouble. So I want us to think about this in the concept, when we think about tradition, we're thinking about what tradition provides. Framework, foundation for beliefs, for systems, for way of living, for way of being. And we're going to look at this through the lens of what has happened and what happened with Jeremiah. So we're going to look at Jeremiah 1, verses 4 through 10, So Jeremiah 1, 4 through 10, I'll have it on the screen behind you as always. So Jeremiah 1, 4 begins, "The word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. Don't be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms, to uproot and to tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant." So, good old Jeremiah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I hit that next one for you. Sorry about that. So, good old Jeremiah. Now, this is one of the most quoted things from Jeremiah. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. All that. We talk about all that, right? But then with Jeremiah, it's like, what does that really mean in his context? So before we get deep into what are the 5 key lessons we can learn from this, I want to start with a little bit of background on who Jeremiah was and what he represented in this particular time. So we didn't read them, but the preceding 3 verses highlight something very important about who Jeremiah was. That he is, number 1, the son of Hilkiah. Hilkiah was a priest. Jeremiah comes from a family line of priests. So his family lineage is naturally tied to the priesthood. So then the expectation would be what? That he would fall in line to become a priest. He would follow in the footsteps of his father, his grandfather, and whoever else before. But based on the scriptures that we just read, this was not the case. Which brings us to lesson 1. Understand that you were known and set apart by God before birth. In the case of Jeremiah, him being known and set apart was this reminder and affirmation from God that he was speaking this was speaking to the Lord's sovereignty in ways that we can often overlook. And I want us to think about it like this. I know it's hard to assume, like, Lord, what does it really mean when you say that you knew us before we were ever born, before we were ever formed in the womb? Lord, what does that even mean to be known relationally? And what he's saying is, I knew the beginning, end, and everything in the middle about you, every fear, every doubt, every worry, everything that you were going to bring before me, I already knew. And on top of that, this is where you gotta, where I tend to look at it like this, as he shares these words, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. before you were born, I set you apart. This is God's nudge. He's saying, look, if you're not confident of anything else, be confident of this. Before you were born, I knew you. And I set you apart for something very specific. Now, in the context of this particular piece with Jeremiah, again, he was in the family line of priests. He was young. He was trying to understand, Lord, what is it? What does this mean that that I'm known by you and you set me apart and all this other stuff? God wanted to clarify and affirm him that he was different, that his path would be different. Not that the path of his family line was bad, not that the path of his family line was dishonorable before God, yet his specific assignment was unique and set aside just for him to fulfill. He was not going to be limited only to the local temple. That's what the priest was. He was limited to the local temple to tend to the people, the needs of the people. Jeremiah was called to reach far beyond that, which then sets us up for a second lesson as we're exploring these scriptures from Jeremiah, is that he then had to answer the call from the Lord. What was the call from the Lord? We find that in verse 5. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations, a messenger for God, one who would stand before nations to proclaim what the word of the Lord had to say. And mind you, again, this was a dramatic shift from what was familiar. He had been trained to understand what it meant to meet the needs of the local people in the priesthood. I know the Mosaic laws. He's training up in that. He's training up in the customs. He's training up in the rituals. These are all the things that he would have known and been trained up to this point. However, the call and the assignment that the Lord had specifically set aside for him, no one else could prepare him for. His father couldn't prepare him for. No other people could prepare him for. That was only assignment that the Lord himself could prepare him for. It was unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And so now you come to this idea, okay, the Lord has something before him that nobody else in his family line had ever done. No one else in his family line knew how to do. And yet this was the assignment that he was supposed to respond to and say, yes, I'm going to do it. As with anybody. Lord, hold on. Verse 6. He says, Lord, I don't know how to speak. I'm too young. So he presents to God two very specific, two very unique things about himself that were his self-perceived limitations. Number one, I don't know how to speak, Lord. But isn't he speaking to the Lord right now? Isn't he having this conversation with the Lord right now? Doesn't it sound familiar with these quote unquote prophets that come into the space? Lord, I don't know how to speak. I don't know what to do. Lord, what is it that you set me up for? Oh, let me ask something else. I'm also too young. All right. So the reality that we're really facing right now is that you got two fears that are really being put before God. God, I don't know if I have the capability to speak the words that you have for me. And not only that, if the people see me, they're going to be like, man, that's a little kid over there. That person's too young to be doing this work. And the Lord gives him this affirmation. He said, look, he says, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone that I've commanded you, that I send you to, and say whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. The Lord is plainly telling me, if I could have been the interpreter in that moment, he's like, look, don't you ever say that. Because saying that assumes that me calling you up in this particular assignment says that I have made a mistake. that I don't know who I'm looking at. I don't know who I'm calling. I don't know the fears. I don't know the infirmities. I don't know anything else that you may try to present before me that are your limitations to what it is that I want to accomplish right now in your life. I think it would be fair to say that Jeremiah likely believed that he could look around and point out several other individuals or men that were more qualified to fulfill the call that the Lord had just placed before him. Why don't you take my dad? He's been doing this work, Lord. He's been a priest. He's been before the people. Isn't that what he qualifies? But with God, he makes it clear. That's why I love the Lord. Because he always tends to use the people that would look to be the most underqualified, the most ill-equipped to carry forth the exact things that he has assigned. And with the case of Jeremiah, he says, look, you're going to go wherever and to whoever I send you to as my messenger. And he guarantees in verse 8, this is why we go back to this. I am with you and I will rescue you. In other words, there is nothing else we need when it comes to the call and assignment before God. So I want to pause here because I think as we think about this particular stage being set with Jeremiah, he presented the fears, and him presenting the fears to what was the call that broke from the traditional route that had been established for his family. So I want us to recap on two ideas. Number one, what was the family tradition in this sense? To be a priest. Was being a priest a bad thing? Okay. Were there qualities or values from being trained up in the priesthood that would disqualify him or make him under-equipped to fulfill what the Lord is asking? No. Because everything that he has been preparing for is what? To honor God, honor the people before God, and be an example to the people before God. The Lord just happened to just pump a little bit more air in that thing and amplify it to not only saying, hey, I've set you apart, but I'm calling you to be a prophet to the nations. This isn't just to your people. These are to more people that you're going to have to be called to reach. And so in this, even though we think about, we can bring to God our limitations, we can bring to God our fears, and he always has a response. Question is whether or not we choose to listen to his response. In the case of Jeremiah, he said, don't you ever say that. You go wherever I send you, and you say whatever it is that I command you. And in doing so, remember, I'm with you, and I will rescue you. Why would he need to be rescued? The only time you would need to be rescued is what? If you're in danger, if you're in trouble. Okay. So he's foreshadowing something. See? But he gives him something else. Which brings us to lesson 3. Receive the Lord's touch and further definition. So here's the deal. To this point, all Jeremiah had was, I am calling you to be a prophet to the nations. And the first thing Jeremiah gives back before his yes is, I'm too young and I don't know how to speak. 2 fears before the Lord. And the Lord then reverses, he lays down that reverse card. Nope. Don't you say that. I'm with you and I will rescue you. And then he does this. This is the beautiful part. This is where it just gets interesting, y'all. Verse 9 and 10. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms. Okay. To uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. So after he receives the Lord's divine touch, the Lord gives him the words that he would say, that he was going to say. And then he further defines what it means to be a prophet over the nations. Because his specific assignment was to uproot and to tear down, to destroy and to overthrow and to build and to plant. Despite, now imagine this, despite what Jeremiah may have thought to be the barriers before, the Lord was like, nope, those aren't going to be your barriers. I'm going to establish the spiritual perimeter of everything that you were called to do in this season and the season to come. And then he affirms them in the greatest area of doubt. I don't know how to speak your word, Lord. Oh, don't worry about that. I'm going to touch your mouth. And as I touch your mouth, this is your guarantee. What you speak are only the words that I give you. So whatever you thought to be that barrier is no longer true. And this idea of being too young, it don't matter because my presence is with you. What more could you ask for? And so as a prophet, as a messenger, in this particular day and time, he wasn't an on-demand prophet. You know, as we think about today day and age, it's like, look, just give me the good word. Give me a good message. Bless me. Tell me something good that's going to happen. Hey, that's the song, right? That's what they think these modern day prophets be about. But with Jeremiah, he might as well have the big target on the back. Don't ask me to say anything you want to hear. Because for the next 20-something, 27, 28 chapters, you about to hear it all. My God. About the uproot, the tearing down, the destroying, the overthrowing. And then I give you a little hope here in, chapter 31, 32. You get a little hope. Jeremiah's call was heavy. And the Lord did not give him further definition until after he received his divine touch. And so when we think about this, and we think about this process, and I want to paint this picture for y'all, because in our particular role, and I'm talking about Pastor Michaela and I, outside of these four walls, we get several inquiries, especially in my with the work I do at Grace Covenant. Get several inquiries from individuals that want to go into full-time ministry, that feel the call of the Lord upon their lives. And the one thing I would share about this, about the call, is that you receive the call, then there is a response that has to happen. You respond to the call. Yes or no. That's first part. Then there's this preparation phase. This is what we're watching, this is kind of what we're reading through in real time that's happening with Jeremiah, where the Lord gives further definition behind what it is that's happening. Example, November, October of, what was it, 2023, I think it was, somewhere around there. Maybe October. It's probably October. October or something. It was late 2023. This is what you got to understand. We received the call from the Lord that we were to pastor a church. At the time, we were still under the headship of our Caleb's parents, pastors, and most would think, hey, that's the path that you're supposed to follow. Take from underneath them. They already are going in that. And the Lord made it clear that was not the case. And so as you can imagine, there was a lot of questioning and tension. Like, Lord, what are you talking about? Like, why would we do that when we could just follow in the line? We've been trained up in this moment. It's like, what I'm preparing before you, very similar to what was happening in Jeremiah, is far bigger than what you have been training for. Lord, I don't know about that. Like this, like we good here. Kansas City, Raytown. This is where we at. We know so many people's over here. We know how to do this work. And we're like, no, this isn't what I have for you all. And so we had to then go through the next steps of the process. Were we going to accept the call? And we answered, it's like, hello, Lord. Okay, we heard you. But are we going to then answer the call? And then the Lord began to give further clarity after we say yes. But then it required us to recognize that we had to leave. We had to leave what was familiar. And leaving what was familiar was the first hard step that we had to take. For Pastor Michaela, this is family line. This is lineage. This is everything, we knew in the faith walk. For me, this would have been the third kind of church I've navigated because, I moved from Texas. So I was accustomed to this idea of when it's time to shift, it's time to shift, but never having to shift together. Yeah. Because that was the church that we were married into, so to speak. That was actually in that church is where I proposed. Out of all places. It's like, well, yep, right there in the frame. Right there. Beautiful experience. I was reflecting on that the other day.
That's a buzz.
It is. It shows you some stuff. You're like, man, it really happened. All that happened. But I share that because the emotional, the spiritual weight of the moment would have made us ignore what was the mandate and the call on God. Lord, this is family. This is everything we know. This makes sense. Lord, it's like, And so we had to answer. We had to give our response. And we had to then do our part that says, hey, communicate what has to happen. This isn't the line that we have to walk. I know that was probably expectation, but that was what we had to do. And so in doing so, that then was the opportunity for the Lord to then work within our hearts to mend the areas that needed to be mended so that we were prepared for what was ahead. Because at the time, we didn't know it was Mission 418. At the time, we did not know that we were supposed to be in Grandview. We did not have further definition. What we did have was, this is what you need to do. Period. Okay, Lord. All right. What do we do with that? And so we had to respond. So then when we think about Jeremiah, very similar to that. We came with all the limitations. Well, Lord, we young. Our parents are, down the street. What you mean? What else do we need to do? Do we need to do this? Like, And so it made me think about when the call does not always look like what we expect, that physical limitations are no excuse. Age is not an excuse. And the Lord has a plan for working through both of them. It's like the concept, you think you're too young? Think about David, think about Timothy, think about Jeremiah, think about all the different ones in the Bible that we can think of. Think you're too old? You got Abraham, you got Moses, you got Anna, the prophetess in the temple when Jesus was born. You go down the list. We can lay before the Lord whatever limitation we have. And the question always comes back, is anything too hard for the Lord? That's the question. And that was the question we had to answer. Is this too hard for him to do? No, it wasn't. And so as with Jeremiah, after he received the Lord's touch, the perspective is that the Lord touched his what? His mouth. Yeah. His mouth, the Lord touching his mouth was to do what? So he could speak. So that he could what? Speak. So that he could speak. But was that all that happened? No, it's never that simple with the Lord. Which brings us to lesson 4. That God equips with new vision for the assignment. Remember, Jeremiah only had, I've called you to be a prophet to the nations, before he received the Lord's touch. If you pay attention to this process, the Lord has the conversation with him in verses 4 or 5. Hey, before I knew you, before you were born, I knew you. Let me go back to these scriptures so I can read it. Yeah, the word, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That was part 1. And then he immediately then goes into it at the end of verse 5. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And the very next thing Jeremiah then declares is, hey, Lord, I don't know how to speak. I'm too young. And then the Lord affirms, and not only through his affirmations, don't say I'm too young. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. I rescue you. I'm affirming that I'm going to go with you. So he receives this affirmation. And then he gets to this point to where he then receives the Lord's touch. And this touch did not only just give him the words to say, it also gave him new spiritual insight and vision into what the Lord wanted him to see. And this is where it gets interesting. So if you go to Jeremiah 1 verses 11 through 12, it says this: the word of the Lord came to me. So this is after the touch. What do you see, Jeremiah? I see the branch of an almond tree, I replied. Then the Lord said to me, you have seen correctly, for I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. I thought he only received the word of the Lord. The words to say. The words has everything to do with what to see. Jeremiah was under the great care of not only the great physician, but the great eye doctor. This was Jeremiah's prophetic eye exam. The Lord was testing him and to see that he was seeing exactly what he wanted him to see. Part of the Lord's call and recognizing the weight that comes with it is that he accepting it is one thing. Then for him to show you what he needs you to see to carry forth the assignment is the next phase. Because you can receive a call. Oh, Lord, I'm called to do this. Okay. But what is the Lord's divine insight into what it is that you are actually seeing? Because we can come with whatever it is that we think we see. But what the Lord is showing him here, after he received this touch, is that I'm giving you a fresh perspective. And this fresh perspective isn't just a random perspective. It's a new spiritual perspective I need you to see. Because later we find out with the first test, it says, what do you see, Jeremiah? He's like, I see the branch of an almond tree. He said, you have seen correctly, for I'm watching. This is the Lord's affirmation. I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. And so when you think about that, it's like the word. Think about that. This is where you just. Jesus was known as the bread of life, as the bread from heaven. He was also known as the living word. I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. When you think about this with Jeremiah, because later in chapter 31, 32, he gives the prophetic insight and the prophetic message about hope and restoration that comes through the Messiah, Jesus. And the Lord is foreshadowing in this moment, I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled. But it begins with Jeremiah being able to see what the Lord wants him to see correctly. Then he gives him a second test. We're not going to read it, but it's in verse 13 and 15. Because he asked him the same question. And in this is when it is then revealed what was further defined about him uprooting, destroying, tearing down, and all that. Verses 13 through 15 tells him how it happens. The destruction that comes from the north, which you have to do a deeper study, but ultimately you find out it is the nation of Babylon that comes and destroys the people. But I want you to think about this. Jeremiah's call, the weight of what it means to break from what was tradition as the priest in the priesthood, was to then declare the very destruction of his people, his family, his loved ones. Not his fault. It was all the lines of folk that came before him and some that was still present at the time because of wickedness and idolatry and all the other stuff that was going on. But he doesn't receive any of this insight and perspective without being proximate with the Lord. His proximity to God. gave him further affirmation, further definition, and further clarity on what it was that his call needed to look like carried out. And that's where I'm going to go back into our story, is when we began to understand, okay, Lord, what does this actually look like? Because initially we were like, oh yeah, we're going to be down in Crossroads District in downtown Kansas City. And, it's just what it seemed like made sense. But part of that journey where the Lord had us under a different name, under different everything, was us understanding what it meant to be obedient to his word and where he was leading in the moment. Because what we perceived to be one thing was actually him doing the heart work. And we didn't understand at the time. And so that's why often we speak about this, it's not even this concept, the very reality that he is going to deal with the heart before he deals with anything else you see lived out. And that is what was happening with Jeremiah. He had to deal with his heart issues, the insecurities, the fears, because the Lord can't work with those. He can't work with those in the way. That's why he said, don't fear, don't be afraid, because that is what fear hinders the ability for God to be able to move, because the fear is what we place before the Lord to say, this is more powerful than you. And so it brings us to our final piece, and we'll close out here. Adhere to God's warning and affirmation. So after all of this, Jeremiah received further definition. He had the prophetic eye exam. He'd been asked the questions, what do you see? The Lord is making sure that he sees correctly. And the Lord gives him one final warning and one final affirmation, found in verse 17. Verse 17 says this: get yourself ready, stand up, and say to them whatever I command you. Do not be terrified by them, or I will terrify you before them. God's warning to Jeremiah was simple. Don't fear the people. He had a calling to fulfill, and fear, like I said, would only get in the way. So God made it clear. Giving in to fear was going to create real trouble for Jeremiah. That was his warning. Don't be afraid of the people, or I will terrify you before them. But God is a loving God, because he doesn't leave it there. In verses 18 through 19, he says this: today I have made you a fortified city, an iron pillar and a bronze wall to stand against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its officials, its priests, against your own family, and the people of the land. They will fight against you, but will not overcome you. For I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. His warning came first to say, don't be terrified by them. Why would Jeremiah have a reason to be terrified by the people? Verse 19 tells us why. Because they are going to fight against his very word. His assignment made him a target, made him immediately hated, made him immediately the non-beloved, so the other word, because his words carried weight that convicted the people of who they were for real. Y'all was wicked, y'all sinful, y'all not following in the Lord, and guess what? The Lord is going to hold y'all accountable, and this is how it's going to happen. Why would I listen to this little dude talk about this? You a messenger of God now? Yep. And not only that, I'm a fortified city and an iron pillar and a bronze wall. So I'm fortified. I'm a pillar, iron, made of iron. So the foundation of my very root and how I stand, you ain't gonna move me. And then on top of that, I'm a wall, so you can't blow through me, to stand against the land and everybody in it. I don't carry the title. I don't care about the title. I don't care about our family connection. I don't care what you've been doing in the land in reference to the people, what assignment you carry. in the case of Jeremiah, he had to stand before it all. Despite the resistance, the opposition, and everything else that would come with it, God confirmed they wasn't going to prevail. And he would rescue them. But remember, they will fight against you. Okay, that's comforting. But they won't overcome. Don't you be afraid of them, or I will terrify you before them. I will give you a reason for you to be afraid of them. And so at that point, I'm like, all right, Lord, I ain't going to be afraid of none of them. I'll say whatever you need me to say right now. And that's what Jeremiah did. And so as we think about this in the case of Jeremiah and what he was able to share, I'll leave it here on the screen, is that him breaking from tradition. So this is why I wanted to frame this at the beginning. It wasn't that he was breaking from what was bad tradition. It just was not the path that the Lord had outlined for him. And because it wasn't the path that the Lord outlined for him, the Lord had to be the one to especially equip. And so when we think about our own unique journeys, is that we have our desires. We have our things we want to do. We have our things we probably think the Lord should have us do. And then the question becomes, is the temptation to resist ourselves because we believe that, Lord, you have to do it this way? Or is it truly saying, all right, I'll let you give further definition. But that means I have to be still enough in your presence to receive it. I have to be willing to give up what was familiar, and I have to be willing to say yes to all of it and trust that you're with me and that you'll rescue me. And so when we finally got through that healing process and we allowed the Lord to truly touch the areas of our hearts that needed to be touched, then it was though he just painted this very vivid picture of what the work needed to represent, that it was going to represent something that would be a place of hope, be a place of healing, be a place of restoration, that it would be a multicultural space that was called to the nations, that would have to reach beyond the four walls, that was ascending and not just a gathering. And so we began to establish the framework for what Mission 418 is today, and it's continuing to evolve as.